Chosen one, your aura brings chaos and revolution to every space you enter, disrupting the comfortable lies people tell themselves about reality. And while they never forget the earthquake of your presence, they somehow can't see you clearly either, trapped in the cognitive dissonance of recognizing something profound, yet being too threatened by their own limitations to acknowledge what's standing right in front of them. What you're about to understand will shatter every confused moment you've endured, trying to make sense of their reaction to your light. A parent might have told you once, in a moment of clarity that pierced through years of conventional wisdom, that some people in this world could be doing the exact same thing as everyone else, yet everything they touch becomes magnified, scrutinized, held to impossible standards. What they didn't tell you, what they couldn't tell you because they didn't fully understand it themselves, was that you weren't born to walk the same path as the masses. The light that surrounds you, that inexplicable energy signature that makes strangers either gravitate toward you with unsettling intensity or recoil as if you've somehow offended them by merely existing. This isn't a flaw in your design. This is your design. Even in your earliest memories, there were signs that your caregivers couldn't quite interpret. The way you would stare at seemingly empty spaces, as if watching invisible performances, how you could sense the emotional undercurrents in a room before you had words to describe what you were feeling, the peculiar way animals and small children were inexplicably drawn to your presence. Teachers would write notes home describing you as old soul or unusually perceptive, but these observations were always tinged with a kind of bewilderment, as if they were trying to solve a puzzle they couldn't quite piece together. Right now, as these words reach your consciousness, there's a clarity emerging that's going to cut through years of confusion like a blade through silk. The people who've been closest to you, those who claim to know you best, who witnessed your vulnerabilities and catalogued your dreams, they've been operating from a playbook you never even knew existed. The revelation that's coming will feel like betrayal wrapped in vindication, truth served with a side of nausea. Those secret adversaries, those smiling saboteurs who've positioned themselves strategically throughout your life's journey, they've had it remarkably easy with you. Your forgiveness became their strategy guide. Your transparency became their intelligence report. Your integrity became the very rope they used to try to hang your reputation in the court of public opinion. What's particularly insidious about this dynamic is how they've weaponized your very nature against you. Remember those moments when you shared your deepest dreams, your most vulnerable aspirations, only to watch those same people later dismiss your progress as luck or timing. When you began to manifest those very dreams, they were already building the case against you in their minds, gathering evidence to support their narrative that you were somehow undeserving of the gifts flowing through your life. This pattern extends far beyond casual friendships into the most intimate relationships you've cultivated. Romantic partners who initially seemed enchanted by your authenticity would gradually begin trying to reshape you into something more conventional, more manageable, more like everyone else they'd known before. They'd present these attempts as concern for your well-being, as helpful suggestions for your personal growth, but the underlying message was always the same: you are too much as you are. But let's pause this unfolding drama for a moment to address something that's been eating at your soul since you were old enough to recognize your own reflection. There's been a persistent whisper in your ear, sometimes from well-meaning family members, sometimes from friends who genuinely thought they were helping, sometimes from society itself through its endless machinery of expectation. You need to make friends, you need to be more social, you need to fit in. These voices created a narrative that painted your natural disposition, your need for solitude, your selective engagement with others, your inability to maintain surface-level relationships as character defects requiring immediate correction. What these voices never understood, what they couldn't comprehend in their limited framework of human connection, was that your solitary nature wasn't a bug in your programming, it was the most essential feature. While they measured success by the quantity of shallow relationships, you were being prepared for something that required a completely different calibration of human interaction. The universe was already beginning to separate you from the herd, but the signals were so subtle that even you didn't recognize them for what they were. The isolation wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Every quiet evening spent alone while others were socializing, every weekend choosing solitude over social obligations, every moment you felt like an outsider looking in, these weren't signs of your failure to connect with others. These were signs of your readiness to connect with something far more profound than surface-level human interaction. Part of you might still be arguing for the old narrative, still believing that your natural inclination towards solitude indicates some kind of social deficiency that needs correction. This internal resistance isn't your authentic voice speaking, it's the echo of everyone who ever tried to convince you that their limited understanding of human connection was the only valid way to exist in the world. This is where the cosmic comedy reveals its punchline, and where the first major revelation begins to crystallize in your awareness. The very people offering this advice, the ones measuring your progress by their limited understanding of human connection, have been unconsciously measuring themselves against you all along. While they've been trying to squeeze you into their cramped definition of normal, you've been serving as their unwitting guide, their North Star, their walking example of what authentic existence looks like when untethered from the desperate need for external validation. The pattern has been so consistent it borders on the supernatural, and once you see it, you'll never be able to unsee it again. Some family member or friend would mention a project, a skill, a career path in passing conversation, sometimes seriously, sometimes as mere fantasy. Then spirit would whisper its subtle guidance into your receptive consciousness, inclining you toward that very same direction. Years later, as you progressed naturally along that path, achieving what seemed impossible to others through what felt like effortless alignment with your purpose, those same people would watch in bewildered resentment. They couldn't understand how you managed to excel in areas they'd been struggling with for decades, how you seemed to absorb knowledge and skills like a sponge, while they remained trapped in cycles of frustrated effort. This created what I can only describe as a very peculiar energy around you, a humbling force that surrounded everyone in your orbit. They wanted to dismiss you, to categorize you as lucky or undeserving, but something about your approach to life kept reflecting their own limitations back at them with uncomfortable clarity. The mechanism behind this phenomenon is both simple and profound. When most people approach a new skill or field of knowledge, they bring with them a heavy backpack of preconceptions, fears about failure, concerns about how they'll appear to others, and a desperate need to prove their worth through achievement. You, on the other hand, approach these same areas with the curiosity of a child and the wisdom of someone who understands that identity isn't dependent on external accomplishments. This fundamental difference in approach creates what appears to be supernatural acceleration in your learning and development. Where others struggle against their own resistance, you flow with the natural intelligence of the universe. Where they fight to force outcomes, you allow outcomes to emerge organically from your authentic engagement with the material. The results speak for themselves, and those results consistently trigger something uncomfortable in people who've been conditioned to believe that anything worthwhile must be earned through struggle and suffering. Rather than using this mirror for self-reflection and growth, rather than allowing your example to inspire their own expansion, they instead began to view you as competition in a game you weren't even playing. This is where the second major pattern emerges, the one that's been shaping your relationships since childhood and setting up the dominoes for everything that's about to fall. There's a wide complexity to your being that most people simply cannot comprehend. While others use skills, knowledge, and achievements as building blocks for their identity, desperately trying to become someone worthy of love and respect, your identity has never been attached to any of these external accomplishments. This fundamental difference in how you move through the world creates a paradox that confuses and sometimes enrages those around you. Spirit recognizes this detachment in you and responds by allowing you to spread open like a flower receiving sunlight, to absorb and embody new experiences, knowledge, and wisdom at an accelerated pace. What takes others years of struggle and study seems to flow through you naturally, not because you're inherently superior, but because you're not carrying the heavy baggage of ego that slows everyone else down. This is why people often feel intimidated or threatened by your presence. Your very existence challenges their fundamental assumptions about how life is supposed to work. The complexity of your nature extends into areas that others find difficult to categorize or understand. You might have interests that span seemingly unrelated fields, emotional depths that make others uncomfortable, or perspectives that challenge conventional thinking in ways that can't be easily dismissed. This multifaceted nature means that people often feel like they're only seeing fragments of who you really are, never quite able to put together the complete picture. This incomplete understanding creates a particular kind of frustration in others, especially those who pride themselves on being able to figure people out or who rely on categorizing individuals into neat, predictable boxes. Your refusal to fit into their mental filing systems becomes a constant source of irritation, a puzzle they can't solve that reflects back their own limitations in understanding human complexity. Meanwhile, you've often felt like you're holding back significant parts of yourself in most social interactions, not out of deception or manipulation, but simply because most people aren't equipped to handle the full spectrum of your thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. You've learned to portion out pieces of yourself, depending on what you sense others can handle, which has created a strange dynamic where everyone thinks they know you, while somehow missing the essence of who you really are. You are their guide. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally. You are the living, breathing example that's been placed in their lives to show them what's possible when someone operates from a place of authentic self-expression rather than desperate self-improvement. Your humble approach to your own gifts, your natural ability to exist without constantly comparing yourself to others, your instinctive understanding that true power comes from within, all of this serves as a mirror for their own potential transformation. The universe has been using your presence as a walking demonstration of enlightened consciousness, hoping that proximity to your frequency would eventually inspire others to remember their own divine nature. The tragedy is that most of them miss this lesson entirely, and this is where the third pattern begins to emerge, the one that will eventually lead to their removal from your experience. When your paths eventually diverge, when your energy naturally pulls you away from relationships that no longer serve your growth, they pin the blame on you. They decide you weren't compromising enough, weren't friendly enough, weren't normal enough. They completely miss the fact that you were never meant to be like them, and that this difference was supposed to be a gift, not a judgment. Hey, this is Mike Inari cutting into your regularly scheduled Chosen One programming for just a moment. We are the founders of the Obsidian Inner Order and the Astral Atom Network, and we're done playing nice. We're in a spiritual war, you know it, we know it, and we're out here bleeding for this mission full time. I'm hungry for fourth dimensional Archon blood, but we need the ammunition. So listen, when you join the Inner Order, you're not just supporting us, you're getting access to exclusive tools they never wanted you to have. Psychic self-defense training, targeted individual intel, spiritual warfare tactics they scrub from the internet, and every week we meet in secret, chosen ones only on Zoom, no filters, no fluff, just real gnosis, real family, real power. It's a 360-degree win. You get what you need. We get to keep fighting. So don't just watch. Drop a like, share this video to everyone you know now, and join the Obsidian Inner Order. Let's finish what we started. Link in the description. Let's freaking go. Now we arrive at the part of this story where the stakes become personal and the spiritual warfare becomes visible. Those people from your past, the ones who knew you intimately enough to understand your patterns but never quite grasped the depth of your character, they've been gathering intelligence. Not consciously, not with malicious intent necessarily, but they've been filing away information about your nature, your vulnerabilities, your dreams and fears, your methods of operation. This information doesn't stay contained within the boundaries of past relationships. These people, operating from their own unhealed wounds and competitive instincts, become unwitting bridges between you and forces that absolutely do not have your best interests at heart. They act as conduits, passing along insights about your character to individuals who would use such knowledge as weapons rather than wisdom. This is how the universe has constructed a particularly sophisticated test for someone of your caliber, and this is where the fourth pattern reveals itself, the one that explains why your relationships have always felt like battlegrounds, even when you approach them with pure intentions. Because you operate from such a high frequency of respect for human dignity, because you naturally see people layer upon layer upon layer, because you extend forgiveness and second chances even when others haven't earned them, you become vulnerable to a specific type of manipulation that wouldn't work on someone more cynical or guarded. The people who challenge you most intensely are those who understand the language of hierarchy, who expect to be beaten down, who actually crave being told what to do or put in their place. When you treat them with the same respect you'd show anyone else, when you fail to establish dominance or demand submission, they interpret this as weakness rather than strength. They cannot comprehend that true power doesn't need to prove itself through dominance games. This creates what I call the paradox of your relatability, and this is where all the patterns begin to converge into a single, overwhelming realization that will change everything. Your transparency, your trustworthiness, your ability to see people for who they really are, regardless of their mistakes, these beautiful qualities become the very characteristics that others use against you. They project their own limited understanding of intelligence onto you, assuming that because you're honest, you must be naive, because you're forgiving, you must be foolish, because you're trusting, you must be easily manipulated. They've been operating under the assumption that intelligence equals deception, that wisdom requires hiding parts of yourself to maintain strategic advantage over others. When you refuse to play these games, when you continue to show up authentically despite their attempts to punish you for it, they become even more frustrated and determined to break down your natural confidence. What makes this dynamic particularly twisted is how they simultaneously rely on your authentic nature while criticizing you for having it. They come to you when they need honest feedback, genuine emotional support, or someone who will see beyond their surface-level presentations to their deeper truth. Yet these same people will later use your willingness to be vulnerable and transparent as evidence that you're somehow lacking in sophistication or worldly wisdom. The gaslighting inherent in this dynamic is subtle but persistent. They benefit from your gifts while convincing you that those same gifts are liabilities. They drink from the well of your authenticity while telling you that the water is poisoned. This creates a chronic sense of confusion in you, a constant questioning of your own perceptions and instincts that has probably plagued you for years. But something extraordinary has been happening in the invisible realms while this drama plays out in your physical experience, and this is where the story takes its most dramatic turn. Your spiritual team, those guides and guardians who've been watching this unfold with increasing concern, have finally reached their limit. There's been a shift in the cosmic order, a decision made in councils you cannot see, that it's time for intervention. The distance that's been growing between you and certain people isn't accidental, it's orchestrated. Those who've been unconsciously serving as bridges to your opposition are being systematically removed from your sphere of influence. The universe is taking action because your mission here is too important to be derailed by those who would rather pull you down than allow themselves to be lifted up. This intervention doesn't always look like dramatic exits or explosive confrontations. Sometimes it manifests as a gradual cooling of relationships, a natural drifting apart that feels organic but is actually divinely guided. Phone calls become less frequent, invitations dry up, conversations feel increasingly strained until contact naturally fades to nothing. Other times the removal is more abrupt, sudden relocations, unexpected life changes, or revelations that make continued connection impossible. The synchronicity of these departures reveals something profound about how energy works in the spiritual realm. These people weren't just randomly difficult individuals who happened to cross your path. They were part of a coordinated pattern, a spiritual curriculum designed to test your commitment to your authentic nature and teach you discernment about who deserves access to your energy. But the intervention goes beyond simply removing problematic people from your life. It's also actively working to resolve karmic debts and complete spiritual contracts that have been binding you to certain individuals or family patterns for longer than necessary. Relationships that should have ended years ago are finally being dissolved. Obligations that were never truly yours to carry are being lifted from your shoulders. Patterns that have repeated through generations of your family line are being broken through your willingness to choose authenticity over approval. What you're about to discover about some of these relationships will initially feel devastating, but it's the kind of devastation that clears the ground for new growth. The clarity that's emerging will show you how they tried to change you, how they genuinely believed you were lacking intelligence because their manipulation tactics didn't work. They expected their mind games, their subtle attacks on your self-esteem, their attempts to label you with limiting identities, to eventually break down your natural confidence and reshape you into something more manageable. The profound disappointment they're experiencing right now stems from their failure to change your mind about who you are. Despite years of pressure, despite countless attempts to fit you into their boxes of understanding, despite their persistent efforts to convince you that your way of being in the world was somehow wrong or insufficient, you remained fundamentally unchanged in your core identity. The realization of how much energy and time was invested in trying to diminish you will probably trigger a complex mix of emotions. There might be anger at the manipulation, sadness for the wasted potential of these relationships, relief that the constant pressure is finally being lifted, and perhaps even a strange kind of gratitude for how these challenges strengthened your commitment to authenticity. But beneath all these surface emotions lies something more profound, a recognition that you've been engaged in spiritual warfare without even knowing it. The battles you thought were personal conflicts or relationship challenges were actually cosmic-level contests between forces that wanted to keep humanity trapped in limitation and forces working to facilitate human evolution. Your refusal to be broken, diminished or reshaped according to others' fearful projections wasn't just personal resilience, it was a victory for the collective awakening of human consciousness. Every time you chose authenticity over approval, every time you maintained your inner knowing despite external pressure to conform, you were striking a blow for freedom that reverberated far beyond your individual experience. This is where the story reveals its deepest truth, the secret that's been hidden in plain sight throughout your entire existence. Every single person who's been brought into your life, every relationship that's challenged you, every individual who's tried to diminish your light or redirect your path, has been part of an elaborate spiritual curriculum designed specifically for your evolution and theirs. While they were supposed to be learning from you, while they were meant to use your example as inspiration for their own growth, while the universe positioned you as their teacher and guide, most of them spent their time trying to become your instructor instead. While they completely reversed the natural order of the relationship, the reason you've always felt like you were looking from the outside in, like there was so much of yourself that remained packed away in some invisible luggage that never got unpacked in social situations, is because you were operating on a completely different frequency than everyone around you. Your soul came here with a specific mission that requires a kind of spiritual solitude most people would find unbearable. This doesn't mean you're destined for loneliness in the conventional sense. It means you're being called to stop measuring your progress by standards that were never meant to apply to someone of your caliber. The people who've been trying to normalize you, to socialize you according to their limited understanding of human connection, these are the very people who've been secretly measuring themselves against your example all along. The breakthrough that's occurring in your consciousness right now is the recognition that you don't need their approval, their friendship, or their understanding to fulfill your purpose here. In fact, their approval would actually indicate that you've dimmed your light enough to make them comfortable, which would be a betrayal of everything you came here to accomplish. As this awareness settles into your being, as you begin to see the full scope of what's been happening behind the scenes of your life, you might initially feel a surge of anger or grief. This is natural. You've been carrying the weight of relationships that were never meant to be sustainable, trying to force connections with people who were only meant to be temporary teachers in your curriculum of awakening. But beyond the initial shock of recognition lies something far more beautiful and empowering, and this is where all the patterns we've traced begin to resolve into a single magnificent truth. The cosmic clearing that's happening in your life right now is making space for connections that operate on your frequency, relationships that honor your nature rather than trying to change it, interactions that celebrate your gifts rather than feeling threatened by them. The universe is preparing to introduce you to others who recognize what you are the moment they encounter your energy. These connections won't require you to explain yourself, defend your choices, or justify your way of being. They'll simply see you and know, the way you've always been able to see and know things that others miss entirely. This is why your path has been so solitary, why traditional advice about friendship and social connection has never felt right in your system. You weren't meant to collect acquaintances or maintain surface-level relationships for the sake of appearing normal. Your connections are meant to be profound, transformative, and relatively rare. The light that you carry, that frequency that makes some people uncomfortable while drawing others like moths to flame, this isn't something you need to modulate or apologize for anymore. This is your contribution to the collective awakening that's happening on this planet right now. Your very existence, your refusal to conform to limiting expectations, your natural embodiment of authentic power, all of this serves as a beacon for others who are ready to remember their own divine nature. The revolution you've been carrying in your aura all along wasn't meant to overthrow governments or institutions. It was meant to overthrow the false beliefs that keep human beings trapped in limited versions of themselves. Your chaos isn't destructive, it's creative, breaking down illusions to make space for truth to emerge. The people who never forget you but somehow never really see you either are experiencing the cognitive dissonance that occurs when someone encounters a frequency they can sense but cannot yet embody. You represent the possibility they can feel but not yet grasp, potential they recognize but don't know how to access. As we reach the culmination of this recognition, as all the pieces of your story finally arrange themselves into a coherent picture, there's one final truth that needs to be spoken directly into your consciousness. The reason you've never been able to find your tribe through conventional means, the reason normal social dynamics have felt foreign and exhausting, the reason you've always sensed there was something different about your role here is because you're not just participating in human evolution, you're actively catalyzing it. Your frequency is literally changing the people around you, whether they're conscious of it or not. Some respond to this change with gratitude and growth, others respond with resistance and resentment. But everyone who encounters your authentic presence is affected by it in some way, pushed to examine their own relationship with truth, power, and authentic self-expression. This is the burden and the blessing of being chosen for this particular mission. The same qualities that have made you feel isolated and misunderstood are the exact qualities that make you perfectly suited for the work you came here to do. The universe doesn't make mistakes in its casting decisions. The loneliness you've carried, the misunderstandings you've endured, the pressure to be something other than what you are, all of this has been preparing you for this moment of recognition, this awakening to your true purpose, this understanding that your difference isn't a flaw to be fixed, but a feature to be celebrated. So as you move forward from this moment of recognition, as you begin to operate from this new understanding of your true nature and purpose, remember that your job has never been to fit into existing systems or meet other people's expectations. Your job is to be so authentically yourself that you give others permission to remember who they really are beneath all their conditioning and compromise. And now, as we come full circle to that sideways glance you've been receiving your entire life, that look of fascination mixed with fear, you can finally understand what people have been seeing when they look at you. They've been seeing the future version of themselves, the possibility of what they could become if they had the courage to break free from the limitations they've accepted as permanent. Welcome home to yourself, chosen one. The wait is over. The real work begins now.